So in this video, I'm going to share one of my favorite ideas for becoming more likable in conversation. So imagine you're at a party or a social gathering and you want to make a good impression on the people that you're meeting here for the first time, to have them think you're interesting, a good conversationalist, memorable, and someone they might want to see again. We're going to use the open book method to come across as more likable. And what's really interesting about this method is it actually leverages principles from science and social psychology to create positive feelings about you in the other person's brain. They're going to associate talking to you with dopamine and like a sense of reward. And I'm going to explain how that is, but this is the open book method. So first of all, I was reading this interesting study recently, which was basically testing the purpose of talking about yourself. It seems like a bit of a random thing to test, but basically the test was people were given the choice between answering questions about themselves, like they were asked certain questions about things they were interested in, or answering questions about other people that they know. And if they were to answer questions about people that they know, then they would actually end up being paid more money. But the interesting thing was, people got so wrapped up in talking about themselves, and once they were asked about something they were interested in, they just couldn't stop sharing and sharing and sharing. They wanted to talk about this thing that they cared about, that they're passionate about. They would actually forego like the extra money. It was more important to talk about this thing that they're passionate about than to get paid extra money. And basically what this study proved was that, I think they were testing that self-disclosure is less about just communicating, and it more actually serves like a purpose. Like our brains link it to like this feeling of reward. When we share things about ourselves, when we get talking about things that we're really excited and passionate about, things that we feel are important, we actually experience like reward feelings, like dopamine. The dopamine centers in our brain become activated as if we've just accomplished like a particular task. And they actually like tested these by like, whilst this was happening, they were like looking at the person's brain waves, and this area of the brain was being activated. And thinking about this, like, I feel like I've got enough evidence of this being true for me. Like, sometimes when I get onto a particular topic that I'm really just excited to talk about, like someone gets me going. Like, for example, a good example of this is I started watching this TV show, X-Men 97. So like the X-Men animated show, it's really good. And I was talking about this with a friend, and suddenly I just went off on this little monologue about like, you know, how much I love the X-Men. I absolutely love superheroes. And I was talking about, you know, like I started talking about like Wolverine's backstory and who all his enemies are. Like his arch enemy is Sabretooth. I don't know. But I'm the type of person where I'm already quite detail oriented. Like when I have a particular interest, I want to know everything about it. But when I get onto a particular topic, something I really care about, I can feel like these positive feelings being pumped through my brain. This dopamine rewarding me for exploring this topic, for sharing something with another person. It genuinely feels like really good. It's almost like a comparable feeling to like drinking a cup of coffee, like that dopamine feeling you get. I don't think this is unique to me. I mean, you can tell me in the comments if this is something that's happened to you. Have you ever had it where when you're sharing something and you have the chance to talk about something you're really passionate about, do you get those like positive feelings in your brain? And do you almost like forget the other person's there? Like you can't get the words out of your mouth quickly enough because you're just enjoying sharing with this person. So we've established there's some kind of scientific basis to sharing. It produces dopamine. Therefore, if you can get another person to start sharing, to get onto something they're really passionate about, they're only going to associate you with those same positive feelings. Like, if you're someone who can consistently do that for them, they're by default going to think of you as like a good conversationalist, someone who can make them feel good. People remember how you make them feel in a conversation, like the emotional experience of that. And whether or not it's intentional, sometimes I just end up really liking a person who can get me onto like my preferred topics, if that makes sense. But the thing is, how do we do that with people we've just met? Because I often find that with people I just meet, and sometimes I'm like this as well, we can be quite guarded. We're not immediately gonna volunteer this information about ourselves. We're not immediately gonna get onto like a really deep topic or reveal something personal about ourselves to a stranger. Like, people don't really do that, at least not where I come from. People just consider it like too early on in the conversation to be talking about these things. Some people get stuck in the small talk phase. So how do we get people to share? So the open book method is where this comes in. And what do I mean by open book? It means to be an open book around people you've just met. Instead of matching their energy, which might be a little bit guarded and not willing to share, be the person who volunteers information about yourself. I know this sounds a bit counterintuitive because we're trying to get them to share with us. So why should we start talking about ourselves? If you're the type of person who's really open about what they like, what their interests are, someone who's just good and positive in a conversation and likes to take the conversation in directions towards things they're passionate about, who likes to talk about those things, I honestly think it's a good idea to do that from like very early on in the conversation. When I was coming out of lockdown, because I've been on a bit of a journey. I consider myself like very socially awkward in school and really anxious. But I finished school early because of we went into COVID lockdown. And I kind of decided I want to reinvent myself and watched like a lot of videos on confidence and social skills. But before going back out there and like trying to meet people, going to like lots of social events, going out like to bars and pubs and stuff, I kind of had to think, like, how do I want to represent myself? Like, what do I want people to know me for? Like, what type of person do I want people to think I am? And I decided, like, I want people to know me for my interests. I want people to know that I still consider myself, like, even now, like a really creative person. But back then, I had so much interest in like art, in music, in fashion. These were the things I almost based my identity on. So I wanted people to know when meeting me, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about. And I would do that. I remember having these chats with some people in the smoking area. I'd say like, yeah, like almost like crazy early on in the conversation. I'd just steer it towards like, oh yeah, I've had a great day. I've been listening to this artist, like listening to this new album that came out, and just immediately sharing how much like the exact things I loved about it, sharing my opinions, getting my voice out there. And the craziest thing was people started opening up back to me. They're like, oh yeah, you like, we would eventually find some common ground. And they'd be like, yeah, no, this is what I think. Like, suddenly they would become more open to sharing and volunteering information about them because we've acted like an open book. And part of that is also asking questions and just having like a general level of enthusiasm. But by sharing things yourself, and I guess not, remember I sometimes had it in my head, like no one cares what I've got to say. But really, if we know that people kind of feel this sense of reward from sharing things about themselves, but everyone's probably walking around with the same idea in their head, no one cares what I've got to say. If we provide them a space to share things, And we start by doing so, giving them that kind of like, sounds a bit corny, but like that safe environment to kind of express themselves in, because they can see that we're doing it. That is going to open them up. That's going to get a completely different side out of them. And like I've still got friends around to this day who I made from that time when I was just going out and working on my social skills when I was like 18. And yeah, like some of my best friends I met through like literally just like 2 minutes into the conversation, I was talking about my interests and like, oh yeah, I love this, this and this. Because people like that type of energy. People like to like know who you are from the moment they meet you. But yeah, that's the video. That's the open book method. Be the person who shares in order to get other people to share back. Remember that. Take care.